everybody here. We are now on Webinar 111. Today is April 18th after tax day, and it is 2014. So Pete's going to talk about WD container columns being used as lookup buttons, right?
Exactly.
And so let's go do it.
All right. First question for you: Where's Tim?
I don't
Thought he
know.
was.
I'll go bug him. I
Yeah.
thought he
What
was.
the heck?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll say, where are you?
Yeah. We're waiting on him. All right. So we're not really going to wait on him. Let's get started. if you've ever tried to use a combo box on a table control, you probably quickly ran into a couple of limitations of combo boxes when you put them on table controls. Uh, they they can't be editable combo boxes. In other words, they can't be the combo box where you actually type something into them as well. They have to be only the type that you drop down and select a value from. The second restriction is the list of possible values is the same for every row. And if you think about how a table control works, that makes sense. You know, you're only defining one row and then that's being duplicated multiple times. So it's very difficult for it to define a different list for every row. Well, of course, my projects are never the simple projects, so I immediately smack into the need of needing all of that. So I had to figure out a way to do it, and what we did was we came up with a the use of the container column, a button, and a lookup screen to emulate a combo box on a table. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. So first thing, let's talk a little bit about what the exact requirements of this project were. It had to be an edit and place table. The results column has to be configurable as either a numeric or a text value for input. Uh, it should be an editable combo box, meaning you can either type in the value or select it from a drop-down list. Regardless of the type configured, you can type in ND, which indicates that no result is available for that test. If it's a numeric-based value, the number of decimal positions is configurable. And there is highlighting logic where you can define high and low alerts and warnings, and it'll automatically highlight a row to let the user know this test result is outside the norm that you would expect for this type of test. It's a visual indication of one, either you may have made a data entry mistake, or two, you need to examine this patient because they've got a test result that's way outside the norm and maybe something's going on. And then if it's character based, you have a configurable list of valid values for that result, for that test. So, as I said, if you think about the two restrictions of combo boxes and tables, they pretty well blew out that entire requirement list, because we can't have editable combo boxes and we can't have a different feature for each one. So, or a different selection list for each row. So it pretty much blew out all the requirements of the project. And, I don't get to say, well, no, you can't have that. I have to figure out how to do it. So I figured out how to do it. And the key to the thing was a neat feature of WinDev table controls called the container column. If you haven't played with it, hopefully this will kind of get you interested and get you taking a look at them. So let's start by taking a look at the final product, see how it works, and then we'll dive into the code and see how we did it. So this is our example. Obviously, you can figure out this column is configured as numeric, and as I discussed, it has an ND value in it right now, indicating that there was no result. If I type 0.55 in here and then tab off, notice it changed to 6.6. The reason for that is this particular test is configured as only allowing 1 decimal position. So it's automatically rounding it to 1 decimal position. Now, if this test were configured for 2 decimal positions, it would allow a 2 decimal position entry. So, right away we're seeing some of the specific configuration each test can have. If we instead come up here and type in 0.65, that got rounded to 0.7, and you notice our row turned red. That's because 0.7 is a high alert value for this particular test. So it automatically colored that column to give us that high alert warning. There's also yellow highlighting for just warnings versus alerts that can be configured. So we've seen some of the features of numerics now. Now let's take a look at our first text example. Notice again it has ND typed into it now, but if we drop down the combo list, we see that the valid values are value 1, 2, 3. And we could actually type in value 1 and it accepts it, or we could drop down and select it from the list. But if we type in example 1, notice it tells us that's not a valid value because it's not in our selection list. And then our final text example, if we drop it down, we see that it has a completely different list of valid values. So each test has a different list of values. And, in my humble opinion, to the untrained eye, this looks pretty much like a normal combo box that we have configured everywhere else in the screen. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close, about as close as I could get it. It's doing a lot of stuff. It knows how many values are listed and is expanding and contracting that lookup screen. This is actually a different window we're seeing right here with this list of values in it. It's sizing that window and positioning that window to emulate that combo box look and feel. So that's the way it works. Now let's go take a look at the code and see how we accomplished it.
Hey, Pete.
Yep.
Hal asks, what triggers? What is the trigger to change options? Is it the test column that says what is happening on that one row? Or you have setups for it, I guess. Huh?
Yeah. Each test has this complete configuration screen that defines it as a numeric character, how many decimal positions it has. what the comparison formula is for alerts, what the alert values are. It's very much end user driven, configurable.
That's
So
pretty
this
cool.
this is the numeric example we're looking at, and then this is the text example where we configured a list of valid values.
Sweet. So this is WD. Could you do something similar in WB?
No, and we were about to get into it. You know, as always, Arnold's got to be a spoiler. The container column is a feature of WinDev, not of WebDev. And
Okay.
once you get into what they're doing with the container column, you kind of understand why it'd be a pretty tall order to get it in
Because that's pretty slick.
WebDev.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
let's
slick.
take a look at. That's the next thing we're going to look at. Is the key to this whole thing is right here, this container column. And if you haven't played with container columns and you are a WinDev developer, you know, get out the online help manual, take a look at it, and start playing with it, because it allows you to do some really rich interface uh, things. You know, here I'm using it to emulate a combo box, but the list of possibilities is pretty endless. What a container column is, as the name implies, it's a container that can hold other controls. And you can put almost any type of other control into that container. You can put multiple controls in there. So you can actually have 3 edit fields inside your container control. You can have images in there. You can have buttons in there, as what I'm doing here. And now the last two is where it really starts getting, you know, mind-boggling. You can put a table control inside the container. So you can have a table inside a table. You can put a internal window inside that container window. So now you could have an edit form as an internal window and host it inside a column of your table. Uh, like I said, the possibilities are endless. Play with it. Hopefully someone will do some webinars showing us some other things that they've done with container controls, because it's a feature that probably is not used to as much as it should, and probably would solve some interface challenges that some of us have. So, like I said, in our instance, all we're putting inside it is a button. And that's what I've got here. Now, this is just like any other button control. All I did was create a button control and drop it into that column, and you see that it replicates it for every row. I just made, you know, a button that looks like the drop-down arrow of a combo box, and then I made the width of my column squeeze up so that it and the entry column next to it kind of give me that combo box look. So that's the look, how I accomplished the look part of it. So now let's take a look at the actual code behind the drop down button. And once again, you know, this is the amazing thing when we start looking at WX code. We are emulating a combo box on a drop down button in an edit in place table, and it's taking 16 lines of code, and that's including 4 comment lines. So really 12 lines of code to accomplish this. You know, that's pretty amazing. So let's take this line by line. 1 and 2, what they are doing is finding out the current mouse position on the screen. And since this event is a click event of that button, what X and Y is going to contain is the exact pixel that we clicked on. So when we are over here and we click right there, it's telling us that pixel, what was the pixel that was clicked on. And the reason that we're using that is so that we can get the positioning of where our combo box needs to display so that it looks like it's the entry field dropping down. So we start out with where you clicked. Then we use a slightly different format of the mouse X position. This one was relative to the screen. So that said, what pixel on the screen did they click on? This one is relative to the control. So now we're asking from the edge of that control, what pixel? So if you clicked 5 pixels over from the edge of that button, this is going to return 5. And so if you're clicking right there, I'm finding out how far from that edge you are. And then I'm moving your X position over. So I'm finding out how far into the button you clicked and adjusting the X position to get to the edge of that button. Then I take the width of the actual entry field, this column, and subtract that off. So when I'm done, X now equals this edge right here. And that's how this drop down shows itself, looking like it dropped down from the edge of that column.
Oh, I get it. That's cool.
Now we do the same thing with the Y position. We started out with the screen position. Now we find out relative to the control. So we're finding out how far down into the control you clicked, and we're moving you to the bottom of the control. And then I wound up having to do a 1 pixel adjustment to get it perfect. So that's what the 1 there is. And now I know exactly where the X and Y position is to get it right underneath that edge of the entry control. And the beauty of this code is, this table is adjustable. So, if they drag that out, it still works. Because it's using the positioning according to its current position of everything. So no matter how, I can resize the screen any way I want, this box still displays in the proper place. Any questions up to that point, or are we ready to dive into the actual lookup screen?
I don't see any questions, but
All right.
I guess I can turn mics on, huh?
Yeah.
So really, but this only happens if that one row needs to have a drop list, right?
Yeah. And thanks for pointing that out, Arnold. Notice that the numeric column doesn't have the drop-down button at all. It's hidden because there is no list of values, so therefore you don't get a drop-down combo.
And that's your configuration test window
Right.
that tells it whether it needs it or not. Okay.
Exactly. All right, so once we have the X and Y position for the window, now all we're doing is opening the window, and this is another little subtle feature that you may not have been aware of or noticed. But if you look in the online help, all of the window open functions allow you to pass in an X and Y position for where that window should be located when it opens. But you'll also notice when you read the online help that it sure would have been nice had they gave us some examples of that call, because my first few times I attempted it, it took a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly how they wanted that call to be made. But, you know, your good Uncle Pete is here to give you that example that you need. So the trick is you pass the X and Y positions as window name, comma, Y position, comma, X position. But if you were to try to do open LU character result, comma, Y, comma, X, that's not right, because that Y and X would be treated as past parameters to that window, not as the X and Y position of the window. So that's the reason that I have to put the window name with the comma Y, comma X in a character string, and then open and use that character string for the window name. It has to be part of the window name, not as actual parameters on the open call. It's a little confusing, very subtle difference, but it makes a big difference in how it functions.
I think Steve's typing. Steve, you can open up your mic too if you want to talk.
The other thing, while he's typing his question, I will point out one other thing that once you figure out how to get the comma in there and get your passing done properly, you likely will not get your window positioned where you expected it the first time. And the reason why is the X and Y's are backwards. You know, everywhere else.
What's Y and X? Y and X.
Everywhere else, it's X and Y. For some reason, this is Y and X. Apparently, it's a Fringlish thing. So that one also, you know, took its toll on what little bit of hair I have, trying to figure out why my window never would position where I wanted it to.
Boy, that is subtle.
The Y and the X are backwards.
Steve, go ahead.
Pete, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
G'day, Pete. I notice you've got the name of the window as a character string. Is it possible to make that dynamic so it gets the full name of the window? I found you can't do it.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, is there a way of doing it?
No, absolutely. You know, that's you know, because it's a character string. You know, I've actually got that on some of my projects for reports and things like that are database driven. That, you know, you could actually specify what window it's opening. So if I had 3 or 4 different lookup windows, yeah, I could have some logic here that's saying what the window name is. And the trick to that is, if you look at the online help for any function, well, and sometimes their online help does not open what I expect it to.
What I was wondering is it possible to make it use the window by name there, so that if the window name changes in the program or something, it picks it up rather than be some fixed string you've typed somewhere? Then it turns out
no, because you're trying to pass that X and Y position, you cannot. If you try to hard code the window name, you've got no way to tack on.
Yeah, but you can't do window like the name of the window win XYZ ... full name. It won't let you do that. because the window
Oh,
doesn't exist. It's an object.
yeah, I don't know that we have.
I've tried doing full name in there, and if you make that a plus quote,
Yeah.
I've found that doesn't work. Because it
Okay.
says you can't access the window because the object doesn't exist, I think. And
Right.
I'm just trying to, is there a way around that?
Not. I've never tried to.
Yeah, okay.
So that doesn't work, huh?
No, well, I haven't been able to make it work, but if you can do it, that would be fantastic. Maybe it does work. What do you?
We'll find
I
out
tried
very
it with an
soon.
internal window name and it wouldn't let me.
Oh, internal windows definitely make it that much trickier.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yeah. See, it's unknown because it's not opened yet.
It's not opened yet. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's the problem. And when it's an internal window, I get a red line and that syntax error.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just wondered because it would make it better because then it's self-checking. All these things in strings are great, but it'd be nice if we didn't have to hard code the string. You could actually use the object, point to the object in the IDE, so that
Right.
if it changes or gets deleted or something, you know there's an error before you
Right.
run it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
No.
this
That's
is
that is definitely a point there. I was kind of going the opposite way with that. Is the other point is the fact that I am able to specify that window name as a character string, which means that I could have logic that's deciding what window to open based on a
yes.
database table entry, those kind of things. And
Yeah, no, that's good.
where I was going with that was the key to know whether a function will work like that or not is if you look at the online help, if it says the parameter is a character string with or without quotes, that's the key. If it says with or without quotes, that means that you can either type it in as the actual window name, the object, and IntelliSense is going to recognize it and all that stuff, or it can be in quotes, which means that it could be a character string, which means that it's going to evaluate that expression at runtime and figure out what name it should open. Almost all the H commands allow you to specify the parameters as strings. Most of the table control commands do almost, I'd say probably 70% of the WX language functions, the parameters can be passed as a string, which, like I said, that's a very subtle thing, but it allows you to do a lot of dynamic coding. And when you get into complicated projects like this, where you're doing a lot of user configuration that defines how the program runs, those are very handy features to have access to. So we figured out how to pass in the X and Y. Now, the lazy man's way of doing this, I guess, or the other way of doing it is you could pass the X and Y as actual parameters to the window and then have the window reposition itself, which might get around your issues, Steve. But I like to use the actual feature that comes out of the box, so to speak, of doing it this way. So now I'm opening the window, telling it where to position itself. Notice I'm passing in the list of valid values, and I'm doing that as it's actually a string field that's comma separated. So that means that my actual lookup window is, it doesn't have any logic of figuring out what list to display or anything like that. I'm just passing in a string that has a list of values, it's displaying them and letting me select one, which means I've got one lookup screen that can emulate my combo box anywhere I need it. And then return value is getting whatever row is selected. So now we check to see if they returned a row. In other words, if they press the escape key, we're not going to do anything. But if they did return a row, I set the actual entry column to the value returned. Then I use another little WinDev trick to execute that code that's in the exit code of character result. Let's take a quick look at that. It's really not part of what we're talking about today, but let's just take a quick look. All of this code, this is all that code that validates the entered value, decides whether or not it needs to be colored for high alerts, low alerts, all of that crazy stuff. All of this code, I would either have to put into a local procedure and then call it from here and call it from over here. But because I can just force the execution of that exit code of that control, I can leave all that code behind that control and then just force its execution from here. And I like being able to do that because, you know, next year when some other developer comes along, or you know, this is Nick's project, and you know, when Nick comes along behind me and needs to add some validation code, he doesn't have to be aware of what I'm doing over with the lookup button and all of that type stuff. All he's going to do is come in here and change this validation code, and because I'm forcing that code to execute, whatever changes he makes here will automatically work for the lookup button as well as someone manually entering the field. So that's another handy little trick of the execute process. Is a, you know, most of us have probably learned, especially if we do web dev work, have learned execute process, TRT click to put, you know, to grammatically make buttons get clicked. But there are other events. Row selection is one I use all the time to force that display code of when you select a row, if you get some special code in there that's popping up displays or populating other tables. There's a TRT selection that takes care of that for you. And the other one here is TRT exit, which forces that exit code to fire. So those are a couple of other handy execute processes that if you're not using them, you should study up on them, because I'll bet you'll find places that you could use them. So that's all the code of our lookup button from this side. All we need to do now is actually look at our window. And you'll notice our window looks a little strange because it's nothing but a table control. It doesn't have any bordering or anything like that. And the reason why is we're trying to make it look like it's a seamless part of that screen. So there's a couple of tricks that you have to do. You have to make sure it doesn't have a border. And obviously you don't want a status bar or anything like that. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure that it's not resizable. You don't want it to have a anchor corner and them to be able to move it around and resize it. You don't want to store the size and position. If you do, all that X and Y code we just did isn't going to work, because it's going to figure out where it was last time and continuously move it back to that spot. So make sure that one's off. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. And we're not going to adapt it to size according to content, because we're going to handle that ourselves. So And same thing with automatic scroll bars. So it's very, very important that you get all those settings turned off so that we are in control of the window. And we'll notice that the window is 221 by 192. And we will also notice that the actual table control is that exact same size. So, excuse me, the table control is using up the entire window. All right, so now let's take a look at what little bit of code there is on this window. There isn't a lot. Remember I said we're passing in a list of values. Then all we do is define an array, and then we do the string to array because that list of values is comma separated. We use the string to array function to turn that into an array of values. And if we look at our table control, it is defined to use that array, valid values. So now we've taken our list, turned it into an array of strings, and that's what we're using to display in the table. Next, we see how many values are in the list. I arbitrarily decided 10 was going to be the maximum I'm going to display without having a scroll bar, because in our instance, it's unlikely that we'll have more than 10 values. And of course, you can't display 100 without doing something because, you know, it would expand off the screen. So if there are less than 10, I'm going to resize the height of this window. And this took a little bit of experimenting to get perfect. But what I'm doing is saying each row takes up 19 pixels. And then I wound up having to bump that end result by 2 pixels for, apparently it has a little bit of a top edge and a bottom edge. And that's what the 2 is for. So if our list of values has 3 values, I'm making it 3 times 19 plus 2 is the height. If it's 10, you know, or if it's more than 10, then I'm saying that's all I'm going to display is 10, so I make the height 192, and then the table's scroll bar is automatically going to kick in, and our combo box window will have a scroll bar in it. Now, the only other code we see, there isn't a lot of code on this screen at all. The cancel button closes and returns an empty string. The OK button closes and returns the selected row. And the other trick is I wanted a single click selection. And this took me a little bit of experimenting to figure out. And that's what this code right here is. It's on the left button up, I execute the OK button. So when you click on a row, when you let it up is when I press the OK button. I tried it on the button down and had odd behavior. I had to do it on the button up to get the functionality to emulate clicking on a row and returning a result. I think my problem was if I did it on button down, I didn't have the right row selected in memory yet because the normal WinDev button selection code hadn't fired yet. So I had to wait until you let the button up. You know, on button down, they're doing their logic of selecting that row. So then when you let the button up, now the row selected, I can know that the value's there and I can press the OK button. So that's what this line of code is. That's all the code. The other thing you'll notice, My buttons are actually over here on the right-hand side. They're not on the window because we're trying to emulate a combo box. We obviously don't want buttons on it. But there are some tricks to these buttons. Notice the cancel button is shortcutted to escape, and the select button is shortcutted to enter, so that that standard combo box keyboard functionality is there of, if someone's using the keyboard, if they arrow down and hit enter, it should select that row. Now, one trick to keyboard shortcuts and hidden buttons like this, you will notice that my button's actually not hidden, it's visible. If you hide this button, the keyboard shortcut will not work. It makes sense, but it causes issues. But it makes sense that they're saying, well, if you're hiding a button, you probably don't want them to be able to use it by shortcut. So what I do instead is I put them off of the window, and then I set the anchoring so that they remain over on the right-hand side. So no matter how this window were to happen to be resized, these buttons are always going to stay off of the screen, so they're never going to become visible, even though they're set to visible, because they're off of the screen and move the same as the screen does. They never become visible. So that's the trick to getting the OK and select buttons so that we have the entire functionality of our selection list. And that's actually it. It probably took me the better part of a day to make all this happen, but at the end of the day, we got 12 lines of code there, 8, 9, 10, 11, 33 lines of code, and the clicking of a few properties here and there. So all it took to get that lookup combo box emulation and a different list of values for each row. So that's what we have for you today. Any other questions, comments, things we'd like to discuss?
Anybody?
It's very clever, Pete. Thank you.
Thanks.
Clever indeed. Clever. Just leave it to Pete. Hey, I wonder if Nick has any comments for you.
Yeah, well, Nick got scolded this morning because I had to fix some styling on that little lookup window, because he's going through our project and getting all the windows styled and getting everything to look universal. And of course, when he got to this window, it didn't look right, so he restyled it, and of course then the combo emulation didn't work. So
Well,
I said,
no,
watch
that's how you
watch
learn.
watch
That's
the
how you
webinar.
learn.
Yeah, watch the webinar today, and you'll know why that Windows had all that special styling on it.
Well, that's one beauty of having this on a webinar, so he can hear you talk about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a benefit to him, because he didn't have to pay me to document what I did for him. He gets it free in the webinar. But you all should thank Nick, because he did pay for me to originally figure out how to do this, because he needed it for his project. So that's always, when you're thanking me, be sure to thank my benefactors that have me work on projects for them and figure this stuff out. That's the reason I'm able to do this stuff.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, thank you so much again, as always.
No problem.
Stuff. come up with stuff that we don't dare until you do it.
So,
Hey,
Okay.
Pete.
I hope the thing you take away from this is to go play with the container controls.
Yeah, I'd love
It's
to see an
a very
example of a
powerful
container
thing.
control.
Uh,
Sorry, Pete. I'd love to see an example of a container control with an internal window inside there. That'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't quite envisioned exactly what I would do with that. I'm kind of waiting for Andy on that one because he is the master of the internal window. He loves internal windows. I don't use them as much. I, uh, I haven't quite gotten my head around them. I guess I use them occasionally, but you know, Andy uses the heck out of them, and I take it so do you, Steve.
Yeah, we are using them a lot at the moment. And I'm just thinking I hadn't actually thought, yeah, I haven't used the container control very much. But I'm looking at coming up to some edit and place stuff that I'm going to require, so I was interested in looking at what you were doing. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I think you could emulate a lot of different things, especially with the internal window. I think you know you at that point you're likely not going to have a traditional looking table at all. You're probably talking a big row, an entire entry form inside each row, or I'm not sure what you would be doing, but there's a lot of different things. We've got a lot of creative people in the group, so I'm sure we'll see some creative examples. Hopefully, we've spurred
Yeah.
the juices enough to get people to start playing with it. I haven't looked at 19 yet to see if they've done anything new in those areas or not.
They have, according to the stuff I read, you can have a whole list of internal windows attached to an internal window control, and those windows are active. So you just simply reattach them. So at the moment, when you do that, it reinitializes the internal window.
So now yeah, I've ran it. It's one of the reasons I don't use them is because more or less every time you change that source, you've got to reload your data and all of that. So now they stay in memory and you can flip back and forth.
I believe so. That's what it sounded like, where the feature that they described, and you can have a whole list of them, an array of them you can select between, so you can have a whole set of things that would make having complex data, yes, that you don't have to reload every time. You'd have better control. It sounds good, and I don't know whether that's going to work in WebDev. I don't know, but in WinDev it would be very useful.
So Arnold, put Steve down for next week after to show us that.
I haven't even ordered 19 yet, mate.
Hey, what time is it over there, Steve?
Where I am, it's 20 past 11 in the evening.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No, we're enjoying a very quiet Good Friday here.
Good for you. Well, if there's no further questions or comments or insights, we'll call it a happy Easter.
Well, I had a question for you, Arnold. How are you going with your Joomla extension? I'm sure lots of people are asking that.
Yeah, I actually, while we were talking here, I was asking Ria to help me on that because she helps me with the background stuff, the Joomla.
Right.
So Ben's father passed away unfortunately last week, and that's what stalled it.
Oh no.
So
That's not good.
Yeah. So that's why we're a little delayed, but you know what? People need to come here live if they want to hear stuff, right, Pete?
Well, the time because of daylight saving, it's now more amenable here. So yeah, I'll be back more often, I think now.
That'd be great. And if you can do your little talk as suggested by Pete, fantastic.
I'll see what I can come up with. Actually, there's some interesting things we've done.
Yeah. That would be
Nah, well, we've done some interesting things with classes and framework kind of display stuff, which may be of interest to people. I don't know. I'll have to think about how I could explain it. It's complicated, but anyway, it's been quite good though. Anyway,
Sounds good.
well, good luck. If you need assistance on the Joomla side, I may be able to help or whatever. But if it's a specific thing you've got, then yes, you'll need to get
yeah,
specific help.
it's a specific extension that is messing up here because when we moved it,
Yeah.
it originally was tied to WinDev Live and all that stuff. So when we had
okay.
when PCSoft didn't like that, when I moved it to the new server, it was looking for probably WX Live, and it's somewhere there. I just haven't had time personally to look at it, so I just moved everything over and have everything ready to go. But I was going to have her, just refine it, and that was one piece that got whacked. So I mean, I
understand.
need to get that done. Okay.
All right. Well, if you need help, let us know. I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, thanks very much for the service. It's great. Appreciate it.
You bet. Take care, everybody.
See you later.
Have a great
Thanks, guys.
weekend. And Uncle Pete, thanks as usual.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks,
Let's get
buddy.
back to work.
Bye.
Okay. Bye now.
See ya. Bye.
Bye. Okay.